You've likely noticed that as the years pass, your body doesn't respond to food quite the way it used to. Perhaps you've tried adjusting when you eat, only to find yourself battling intense hunger or wondering why the results you expected never quite arrived. What if the problem isn't when you eat, but what you're eating during those crucial windows? There's a widespread assumption that intermittent fasting is simply about timing, that the clock does all the work while your food choices remain irrelevant. This understanding misses something fundamental about how your body actually responds to different nutrients during fasting periods. The difference between struggling through hunger pangs and moving effortlessly through your day may have less to do with willpower and everything to do with a single overlooked factor that most discussions never mention. You are listening to the Longevity Library, where we archive the wisdom of healthy aging. The science of eating during intermittent fasting, maximizing benefits while minimizing discomfort, understanding the two fundamental mechanisms of fasting. When we examine why intermittent fasting produces such remarkable health benefits, the explanation ultimately comes down to two distinct biological processes. Understanding these mechanisms is essential for making intelligent decisions about what to eat during your eating windows. The first mechanism involves insulin regulation. Insulin is a hormone released primarily in response to food consumption. When you eat, insulin rises. When you abstain from food, insulin gradually declines throughout the duration of your fast. This pattern, repeated consistently over weeks, months, and years, creates the conditions necessary to reduce even stubborn cases of insulin resistance. For individuals with type 2 diabetes, this process can effectively reverse the condition in the vast majority of cases. The second mechanism is autophagy, a term that describes the body's cellular recycling process. During periods when you're not eating, when no new resources are entering the body, your systems become much more efficient at utilizing existing resources. The body upregulates the cellular machinery that goes around scavenging for materials, identifying what's worth keeping and what should be discarded. This process significantly enhances detoxification and immune function. Additionally, during fasting, growth hormone can increase by as much as tenfold or more, which improves fat burning while helping preserve protein for muscles, enzymes, and hormones. Intermittent fasting versus extended fasting. It's important to distinguish between intermittent fasting as a lifestyle approach and extended fasting as an occasional therapeutic intervention. Extended fasting, going 3, 5, or even 10 days without food, can generate very high levels of autophagy and reverse many disease conditions. However, this approach is not sustainable as a regular practice. Most people can reasonably undertake extended fasts a few times per year at most. Intermittent fasting, by contrast, involves regular, predictable cycles of eating and fasting. You might eat once daily, or confine your eating to a 4-hour or 6-hour window each day. Some people fast every other day. The key distinction is sustainability. Intermittent fasting can become a permanent lifestyle pattern that you maintain week after week, year after year. While intermittent fasting cannot produce the massive autophagy levels of extended fasting, it generates modest amounts of this beneficial process on a regular basis. The cumulative effect of consistent, moderate autophagy over time remains highly valuable for long-term health. The critical role of food choices during eating windows. The foods you choose during your eating periods dramatically influence your experience during fasting periods. The ideal foods maximize nutrition and satiety while setting you up for success by reducing hunger and suffering when you're not eating. Understanding how different nutrients affect your biology allows you to make strategic choices that support rather than sabotage your fasting goals. Carbohydrates and insulin dynamics. Some people claim that carbohydrate consumption poses no problem during intermittent fasting, suggesting you can eat pizza, pasta, and bread as long as you maintain a fasting period. While this approach may work for certain individuals, for many others it creates significant difficulties. The fundamental issue involves insulin levels at the start of your fast. When you consume high-carbohydrate meals, you substantially elevate your insulin. Moving from a high insulin level to the low level required for insulin sensitivity, reversal, and autophagy takes time. The higher your starting point, the longer this transition takes. If every meal significantly raises your insulin, you create a backlog that must be compensated for each time you begin fasting. Different nutrients trigger different insulin responses. Refined carbohydrates, sugar, bread, pasta, and starches provoke substantial insulin release. Protein triggers a moderate insulin response, with the amount depending on portion size. Large protein portions signal abundance to the body, which may convert some protein to glucose, thereby increasing insulin. Smaller protein portions are less likely to trigger this conversion. Fat triggers virtually no insulin response at all. When you follow a low-carbohydrate eating pattern, you begin each fast from a much lower insulin baseline. This gives you a significant advantage. You reach the beneficial low insulin state much faster, spend more time in autophagy, and achieve deeper levels of cellular cleanup during each fasting period. Carbohydrates and hunger regulation. Beyond insulin considerations, carbohydrates profoundly affect hunger and cravings. When you consume primarily whole foods, fat, protein, fiber, without processed ingredients or added sugar, your glucose and insulin levels remain relatively stable. Adding sugar and refined carbohydrates to your diet creates blood sugar spikes. In response, the body produces large amounts of insulin, which drives blood sugar down rapidly. This creates a pattern of peaks and valleys. When blood sugar drops low, a condition called reactive hypoglycemia, you experience lethargy, headaches, and most significantly, intense hunger and cravings. Carbohydrates create unstable blood sugar, but the problem extends beyond simple blood sugar regulation. Certain carbohydrates, particularly sugar, wheat, and other refined carbs, stimulate opiate receptors in the brain, the same pleasure receptors activated by addictive substances. When you attempt to fast while accustomed to these foods, you're not merely going without food, you're overcoming a physiological addiction. This explains why low-carbohydrate eating makes fasting dramatically easier by reducing hunger, minimizing cravings, and decreasing suffering. The protein paradox. Balancing satiety, insulin, and autophagy. Protein presents an interesting challenge because it affects different fasting benefits in different ways. For satiety, protein with fat, such as fatty meats, produces tremendous fullness, especially when combined with fiber. For insulin control, protein works well but should be consumed in moderate amounts. However, for autophagy, protein becomes highly restrictive. Even small amounts of protein can shut down autophagy because the absence of incoming protein is precisely what signals the body to become efficient at recycling its existing resources. Research on fasting mimicking diets has demonstrated that keeping protein intake below approximately 18 grams per day allows most fasting benefits to continue. 18 grams is a very small amount, roughly 3 ounces of meat or 4 eggs. You cannot maintain this level of protein restriction indefinitely. However, understanding this threshold provides useful guidance for strategic eating decisions during fasting periods. Protein thus becomes the balancing factor among competing priorities. Satiety and insulin management are relatively straightforward. Autophagy requires careful protein limitation. This tension informs which foods best support your intermittent fasting practice. Animal-based foods, fatty fish, grass-fed meat, and eggs represent the most filling food options. consumed as meals in themselves. They provide deep satisfaction and satiety. They produce low to moderate insulin responses unless consumed in very large quantities. However, they contain moderate to high protein levels, which means they are not optimal choices if maintaining autophagy is your primary concern. Even modest amounts will shut down the cellular recycling process. Nuts. Among nuts, macadamia nuts and pecans stand out as particularly favorable options, especially when consumed raw. They provide considerable fullness, though not as much as animal foods. They are low in carbohydrates and protein while being high in fat and fiber. Their insulin response is minimal. You cannot consume unlimited quantities. Both calorie and protein content will eventually register with the body's nutrient sensors, but modest amounts can be consumed while remaining in the autophagy zone. Non-starchy vegetables, leafy greens, cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, and similar vegetables contain very low levels of carbohydrates, protein, and fat. They barely register on nutrient sensors and trigger minimal insulin response. Their high fiber content provides volume. However, most people find it difficult to consume enough of these vegetables alone to achieve significant fullness. When combined with fat, butter, olive oil, or other healthy fats, they become considerably more satisfying while maintaining their favorable metabolic profile. Strategic timing. Extending the benefits. The timing of your meals and any small snacks during fasting periods significantly affects your results. Consider a typical pattern. You finish dinner at 6 p.m., having consumed a substantial meal with protein, fat, and fiber. You feel full, sleep through the night, and skip breakfast. By noon the following day, you've completed an 18-hour fast and begin feeling hungry. The benefits of autophagy and insulin sensitivity reversal begin accumulating around the 12 to 14-hour mark. By 18 hours, these processes are well underway but have only just begun. If you could extend your fast another 6 hours, you might triple the benefits of this particular fasting period. If you consume a full meal with substantial protein at the 18-hour point, you shut down the entire process. Autophagy stops. Insulin rises. You have broken your fast completely. However, if you consume something small, just enough to ease your hunger and help you continue, and that something contains pure fat or is very low in both protein and sugar, you might successfully extend your fast for those additional 6 hours while maintaining most of the fasting benefits. This strategy is not for everyone. If you can comfortably complete a 24-hour fast without assistance, by all means do so. But if you're struggling and genuinely need something to get through, this approach can help you dramatically increase your results. Fat-based options for extended fasts. Bulletproof coffee, black coffee, or tea with added fat exemplifies this strategy. The fat may come from butter, MCT oil, or coconut oil. This combination provides calories and some nutrients while containing zero carbohydrates and virtually no protein. The insulin response is nearly zero. The body's nutrient sensors barely react unless the quantity becomes excessive. In the strictest biological sense, consuming anything with calories breaks a fast, from a practical standpoint. However, you retain most intermittent fasting benefits while gaining the ability to extend your fasting period significantly. Various fats work well for this purpose. Butter, extra virgin olive oil, coconut oil, and lard contain zero carbohydrates and only trace protein in the case of butter. They provide substantial fullness. While you wouldn't typically eat these fats alone, they work excellently in coffee or tea, and can also be added to vegetables. A salad with generous olive oil and butter, for example, provides enough satisfaction to help you continue fasting without consuming sufficient protein or calories to exit the fasting zone. Coconut cream deserves special mention. It provides excellent fullness while meeting all the favorable criteria: very low carbohydrate, very low protein, high fat, minimal insulin response. It works beautifully as a coffee creamer, in tea, in smoothies, and can even be used to make a satisfying hot chocolate. Avocado, a unique option. Avocado appears on virtually every list of recommended foods, and for good reason. This fruit, though it functions more like a vegetable in culinary applications, provides substantial fullness while containing very low carbohydrate, very low protein, moderate fat, and high fiber. Its insulin response is minimal. It meets virtually every criterion for foods that support intermittent fasting. Compared to other plant foods, avocado is exceptionally high in fat, which explains why it satisfies more effectively than almost any other plant option. Building your personal approach. The foods discussed here represent a starting point rather than an exhaustive list. Understanding the underlying principles, how different nutrients affect insulin, satiety, and autophagy, allows you to expand into similar foods and discover what works best for your individual biology. What creates profound fullness for one person may not feel as satisfying to another, because individuals vary significantly in their responses to different foods. The key is to recognize that food choices during eating windows directly influence your experience during fasting periods. Strategic selections can minimize hunger, reduce suffering, and extend the duration and depth of your fasting benefits. Poor choices can sabotage your efforts by creating unstable blood sugar, triggering cravings, and ensuring you begin each fast from a disadvantaged metabolic position. Practical applications for daily life. For the 50-plus audience particularly, these considerations take on added importance because metabolic flexibility typically decreases with age. Insulin resistance becomes more common. The body's ability to switch between fuel sources may slow. Strategic food choices become not merely helpful, but essential for maintaining health and vitality. When planning your eating window meals, prioritize foods that provide sustained satisfaction without creating metabolic disruption. Fatty fish offers omega-3 fatty acids that support brain and cardiovascular health while providing excellent satiety. Grass-fed meats contain different fatty acid profiles than grain-fed alternatives, though both can fit within a well-designed approach. Eggs remain one of the most nutritionally complete foods available. For vegetable consumption, consider that cooking methods matter. Raw vegetables provide maximum fiber and nutrient density, but may be harder to digest for some older adults. Light steaming can increase digestibility while preserving most nutritional benefits. Roasting vegetables with healthy fats enhances flavor and satisfaction while adding beneficial oils. Regarding fat consumption, remember that dietary fat does not significantly impact insulin. This makes fat an invaluable tool for managing hunger during eating windows and for those occasions when you need a small bridge to extend a fast. However, fat is calorie-dense, and caloric intake still matters for weight management goals. The absence of insulin response does not mean calories don't count. It means fat provides energy without triggering the hormonal cascades that carbohydrates initiate. Managing the transition period. For those new to intermittent fasting or transitioning from a higher carbohydrate eating pattern, the first several days to weeks may prove challenging regardless of food choices. The body requires time to adapt to using fat for fuel efficiently. During this adaptation period, cravings may be intense and energy levels may fluctuate. This is normal and temporary. Supporting yourself through this transition with strategic food choices can make the difference between abandoning the approach and successfully establishing a sustainable pattern. Focus on adequate fat and protein during eating windows to ensure satisfaction. Consider using fat-based bridges if needed to extend fasts during the adaptation period. Be patient with yourself as your body learns to become metabolically flexible again. For those already adapted to intermittent fasting, periodic reassessment of food choices remains valuable. As seasons change, as activity levels shift, as health circumstances evolve, your optimal food selections may also change. The principles remain constant, but their application should remain flexible. Understanding individual variation. No single food list works perfectly for everyone. Some individuals thrive on higher protein intakes. Others find that even moderate protein reduces their ability to maintain comfortable fasts. Some people digest nuts easily, others find them difficult. Some experience excellent satiety from avocados, others feel they need more substantial foods. The framework provided here, understanding how foods affect insulin, satiety, and autophagy, enables you to become your own expert. You can test different foods, observe your responses, and refine your choices over time. This personalized approach yields better long-term results than rigidly following any external recommendation. Pay attention to how you feel during fasting periods following different eating window choices. Notice whether certain foods create sustained energy or subsequent crashes. Observe your hunger patterns. These subjective experiences provide valuable data for optimizing your personal approach. The bigger picture, intermittent fasting, combined with strategic food choices during eating windows, addresses multiple mechanisms of aging and disease. Reduced insulin exposure decreases inflammation. Autophagy clears damaged cellular components. Improved metabolic flexibility enhances energy regulation. These processes work together to support healthy aging. For the 50-plus population, these benefits take on particular significance because this is when age-related decline typically accelerates. Cardiovascular disease risk increases. Cognitive changes may begin. Metabolic conditions become more prevalent. Intermittent fasting, properly supported by appropriate food choices, addresses each of these concerns at a fundamental level. The approach described here does not require perfection. Occasional meals that deviate from optimal choices do not negate the benefits of an overall pattern. Consistency over time matters more than any single eating decision. The goal is sustainable practice, not transient perfection. By understanding the mechanisms, how insulin works, what triggers autophagy, which foods create satiety without disrupting fasting benefits, you gain the ability to make informed decisions that support your health goals. This knowledge transforms intermittent fasting from a simple eating pattern into a sophisticated tool for maintaining health and vitality throughout the later decades of life. The single most important understanding to carry forward is this: what you eat during your eating windows determines whether your fasting periods become a source of cellular renewal or merely another exercise in endurance. The choice between struggling and thriving rarely comes down to willpower. It comes down to understanding how protein, fat, and carbohydrates each speak a different language to your insulin, your hunger hormones, and your cellular recycling systems. We'd love to hear what your experience has been with finding the right foods that carry you comfortably through your fasting windows. If this archive of wisdom has added something valuable to your understanding, we invite you to explore other recordings in the Longevity Library and subscribe so you never miss new chapters in this ongoing collection. This is the Longevity Library. Listen, learn, and live longer.